Alright everybody, this video is going to be straight to the point. If you're looking to punish bosses as a strength build, if you want to make the most out of your individual strength stat, these are 5 incredibly powerful builds that can absolutely punish and destroy bosses with ease. By the way, for the purpose of this video, it's going to be primarily main bosses. We got Beast Clergyman, Malachite, we got the Godskin Duo, a whole bunch of good bosses later on in this video. This first clip, though, was just 2 side bosses that I did to show stackable damage. And the first one we're going to start with at number 5 is Bloodhound's Claws. Claws are now better than ever. After patch 1.09 buff them, they're extremely powerful, and you can get a lot specifically from Bloodhound's Claws in the heavy affinity. When you add Blood Flame Blade, you can get a ton of bleed buildup, a good amount of AR and damage, and you can absolutely shred through bosses' HP. Yeah, that buff on 1.09 really made Claws so much better. They're so much more powerful now. They're really good. And then if you're a strength build and you need to switch it up, you want to run bleed for a little bit, you can just put these on heavy affinity, get really good AR, and then get a ton of bleed out of them as well. As far as the Ash of War goes, it doesn't really matter which one you use. You can use Bloodhound Step or anything really. I wasn't really paying attention to that too much because your regular damage, basically for me on an Xbox, it's going to be your RB, your quick attacks. They're going to build up so quickly as far as bleed and damage goes because, again, it scales well with strength. It's a solid strength build switch up, and it can just destroy bosses. You're going to see it on the Godskin Noble here, how quickly we can take him down. He's going to get absolutely shredded by Bloodhound's Claws. It's going to be a matter of seconds where we build up around 20,000 damage, and it no doubt impresses. Bloodhound Claws and heavy affinity are incredibly powerful, and if you're running a strength build and you want to switch quickly up to a bleed build, this is something that you have to try. That is number 5, which is Bloodhound's Claws in heavy affinity. Incredibly powerful. We're going to get in a stats build, everything you need to know. Let's get into equipment here for this awesome setup. Equipment, we have Bloodhound's Claws in heavy affinity. Any Ash of War will do. We used a weightless seal. I had a random set of armor on. Millicent's Prosthesis, Rotten Wind Sword Insignia, Dragon Crest, preferably the Great Shield, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. And then you're going to want the Thorny tier or the Defense tier, either one works, and then the Faith tier for buffs. Let's get into stats. A lot of these stats are going to be similar, but I'm just going to throw them up here to talk about different things in terms of the build and whatnot. Now for this, I just went for 80 strength. A lot of these are going to be highly strength based. You can go with that, throw on Blood Flame Blade, get a little bit as far as Faith goes, use the Faith tier so you can do some additional buffs like Golden Vow, Hellish Rebury if you want, or Flame Grant Me Strength. Next up is going to be the Giants Crusher build. This is more of a 2-hit on New Game Plus 7, as all the footage in this video is from New Game Plus 7, but this is an incredibly powerful one. After some buffs, and I ended up messing this up, and I had it on Fire Affinity when I wanted it in Heavy Affinity, but you can use this in 2 different ways. He's going to obviously take more damage to Heavy Affinity, and in just 2 hits with some buffs and whatnot, the Draconic Tree Sentinel went down in a very, very short fight. This is an incredibly powerful build. Let's get into equipment for this one. For equipment, we have the Giant Crusher plus 25 with Royal Knight's Resolve. We had it in Fire Affinity. We had a Seppuku Sword to bring our HP down. Any seal will do. The Twin Bird Kite Shield will also give you additional damage when you're at low health. Axe Talisman, Red Feathered Brand Sword, Fire Scorpion Charm, Kindred of Rot's Exaltation. We have the Mushroom Crown on, and then you're going to want the Charge tier, and then you can throw in something like the Faith tier for buffs. Let's get into stats. Running the Fire one, you're going to want the Fire tier, and then as far as stats go, this is very similar to the last one. Whenever you're using the Giant Crusher, basically the best bet is if you're at 150 or 125, is just to invest as much as you possibly can into your strength stat. Of course, the Draconic Tree Sentinel was the last victim, and the next one up here that we're going to talk about, and we have several really great ones, by the way. This is a pretty awesome video, but the next one's going to be the NightRider's Glaive, which I did a little bit of a change up for, we're going to talk about here, and it has an S in heavy scaling at number 3. I decided to mix it up here and use Ice Spear. I know that was a weird choice, but in Cold Affinity, it still gets a B in strength scaling. But if you're using this mainly, you're going to want that S scaling heavy, and then you can use a bunch of different Ashes of War and make use out of NightRider's Glaives. Awesome reach, damage, and the S in heavy that you get, which is fantastic for your strength stat. Yeah, this was just because I opted to change it up and turn it into something different, but no matter what Ash of War you're going to use, and there's a ton of different ones you can use, anything from Earthshaker to Lion's Claw, whatever you can really put on this that can make use of that S and heavy affinity, you're going to get a ton of damage out of the NightRider's Glaive. It has excellent scaling, and even with Ice Spear and that B scaling for the Cold Affinity, it does a ton of damage. It's always fun beating up on Beast Clergyman and Malekith, although I was able to beat up on Beast Clergyman a little bit more. I ended up backing up here a little bit as far as the end of the fight goes, but it's New Game Plus 7 and they all have a ton of HP, and I was using Ice Spear after all to just show the mix-up and the things that you can do with the NightRider's Glaive. As far as Ice Spear itself, you can see that he did get the Frost proc, which gives us additional damage. And you can go in for the melee hits if you want. I just wanted to show off how cool Ice Spear is and the fact that you're still getting that B scaling, which is pretty awesome. You can still get reasonable damage out of this, even though Ice Spear mainly scales with dexterity and intelligence. But we have a little bit invested in intelligence. This is a fun build and fun setup, and the NightRider's Glaive is no doubt one of the best strength weapons in the game. That was a pretty cool fight too. Let's get into equipment for this one. This is a really powerful one. I really like the NightRider's Glaive. For equipment, we had the NightRider's Glaive plus 25. I had it in cold affinity with Ice Spear for a little bit of a change up. Any seal will do, but I was using a weightless seal for this instance. And then I had a random set of armor on. We used the Dagger Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dragon Crest, Shard of Alexander, and then we had the Faith tier so we can do some buffs as well. Let's get into stats. By the way, with this setup, you can run the Star Scores Greatswords as well with around the same stats. For this, we went with 60 Strength, and then we invested around 20 Intelligence to get some damage out of Ice Spear and to do a little bit of a change up for the NightRider's Glaive. We want to buff this with Golden Vow and Hellish Rebury because that's going to give you more damage for Ice Spear. And at number 2, we have the Fist weapons, and for this, I'm using the Iron Ball, which are incredibly powerful for strength builds. You can use the Star Fist too. I chose to use the Iron Ball here, but these are really powerful. When you put these in heavy affinity, you get an A scaling, and on top of that A scaling, these do a ton of posture damage and damage in general. Yeah, you're going to get really good damage out of these. I use Royal Knight's Resolve. You're going to see Morgott gets absolutely punished by this build. If this is one of the ones that's going to highlight on here, this one and the next one are definitely the best two in terms of punishing bosses with strength builds. You get a ton out of the Iron Ball, Star Fist, whatever you want to use in heavy affinity. The posture damage, the posture breaks you're going to get, and then the chunk damage with charged attacks. Always impressed as far as the fist weapons go in the game. They're really powerful. By the way, I have something I want to say at the end of the video, so definitely be sure to stick around to that. And for this, we're going to show equipment. Equipment, we had the Iron Ball with Royal Knight's Resolve on at heavy affinity. We had a weightless seal, random set of armor on, Axe Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dragon Crest. You can throw on Rotten Wing if you're going to build up a little bit in the successive attacks. You're going to use the faster attacks. You can use that to buff the damage further. And then we use the charge tier, and then you can use something like the faith tier so you can get in your buffs as well. Let's get into stats for this one. Now for stats on this one, you want to invest as much as possible in strength. I know a couple of the stats I showed because I was mixing in builds. For any of the ones other than the NightRider's Glaive, I've had anything invested in intelligence, you would just put it back in your strength stat. But for this, go as high as you can for your strength stat, and you're going to get a ton of damage out of these or the Star Fist. They really do a lot of damage and a lot of posture damage. At number 1, my top favorite strength build currently in Elden Ring still is and has been for a very long time is Guts Greatsword with Lion's Claw. Now, as far as Guts Greatsword and Lion's Claw, it's one of the most reliable builds in the game. With just Flame Grant Me Strength or Hellish Rebury and Golden Vow, you can do a ton of damage with this Ash of War. It builds up consistent posture damage too. It's one of the most reliable things you can use throughout the entire game of Elden Ring, and it is my favorite strength build. The damage is unreal when it comes to Lion's Claw, and then the Guts Greatsword, you have good range, you have a good weapon in general, and then you can do different things, mix in like charge attacks and whatnot, and keep the posture pressure up. It really never disappoints. It's one of the best builds and one of the most reliable builds you'll ever use. If you're having a hard time and you're a strength build, switch to Guts Greatsword and Lion's Claw, and everything's going to be a lot easier. By the way, I wanted to mention real quick, this build will never let you down, by the way, but if you're not subbed and you love overpowered PvE builds or From Software Elden Ring content in general, definitely hit that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss out. When DLC finally does roll around, we're going to be doing a ton of content for that as well. Back to Lion's Claw. So if you want to punish bosses the most, for me, I think it's going to be Guts Greatsword and Lion's Claw, or it's going to be the Iron Ball or Star Fist. Any of those, pretty much, you're going to do a ton of posture damage. You're going to beat up bosses consistently, and you're just going to chew through HP. Everything is on New Game Plus 7, as I mentioned in this video, and even with that said, nothing was too challenging. Yes, I recommend Sleeping Pots for the Godskin duo. And by the way, the reason I did this video is I haven't really done a lot for strength builds, so this was a pretty fun one. Let's get into equipment. We have Lion's Claw on a Guts Greatsword plus 25, a Weightless Seal, Raptor's Black Feathers, Green Turtle Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dragon Crest, preferably the Great Shield, Shard of Alexander, and then the charge tier if you're doing charge attacks, and then you can throw in something like the Faith, the defense tier, so you can do buffs, or add a little extra defense. Let's get into stats. For stats with Guts, Greatsword, and Lion's Claw, other than the minimal dex requirement, you're going to go as high as you possibly can in strength. If you're two-handing it, pump it up to 70, and that pretty much maxes you. I think at that point, you're just going to get a ton of damage out of it. And again, the posture damage, the amount of damage you'll get from Lion's Claw in general, never disappoints. So that was a pretty awesome video and highlighted my 5 favorite current strength builds, weapons in general, everything that you can use. Hopefully this helps you build a powerful strength build that can take on any of the bosses in Elden Ring. By the way, the thing that I want to mention real quick is whatever strength build or whatever specific build you like the most in here, comment below. And then if it ends up winning in the comment section, I may do an entire run with that build. I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully that'll be something you guys can look forward to too. Not on the Discord, definitely be sure to join the Discord. There's over 500 people in there now. It's an awesome growing community, and if you're not subbed and you love overpowered PvE builds, be sure to check out all the awesome builds there on my channel. Thanks for watching. As always, I will catch you guys there.